Do you ever stand at a crossroads in your life and feel the ground under your feet soften into mud? Because every option looks both necessary and terrifying? That slow sinking, the hesitation, the rehearsed doubts, the tiny mental voices that whisper every possible failure, is what this story and toolkit are about. Imagine for a moment an old cartographer who stopped drawing rivers and mountains and began to chart doubts, the paths people fear, the marshes where certainty dissolves, the ridgelines of small, stubborn beliefs. He calls himself a mapper of uncertainty, and his maps change lives. Some people who study his inked lines find a way forward. Others stare at the paper and find themselves stuck, as if the map made the doubt more real. What I want to do for the next 10 minutes is walk you through that cartographer's method, the what, why, and how, so you can use the same approach to draw a map of your own doubts and use it as a tool, not a prison. We'll also answer the hard question the cartographer asks himself. Does an external map of doubt free your choices, or does it simply turn your inner uncertainty into an immutable landscape? And importantly, you'll walk away with a practical exercise you can do tonight: how to draw your first map of doubts and use it to move rather than to stagnate. The cartographer's village was built on an island of decisions: a schoolteacher deciding whether to leave for a city job, a baker choosing between expanding the shop and keeping the small, steady rhythm of the oven, a woman wondering whether to have a child. People came with the same complaint. Their minds were full of possibilities and fear, and nothing helped sift the two. So the cartographer began to draw what people could not see. He would invite them to speak their worries, and as they spoke, he translated phrases into lines. I might disappoint my parents became a steep pass labeled Duty Ridge. A what if I hate it became a narrow trail marked Fear of Misfit. If I choose this, I will lose X, sketched as a marsh. Bog of lost options. Over time, his sheets filled with strange geography, dotted lines for regrets, dashed lines for hopes, sinkholes that swallowed entire plans labeled all or nothing pit. At first, the maps were used like therapy in ink. A person would trace a route and, with the cartographer's help, find a safer, truer path that honored both desire and constraint. But maps have power. When someone walked away from his shop carrying a sheet that emphasized sinkholes and impassable swamps, they sometimes returned unable to make any step at all. The map hadn't liberated them. It had given their fear a landscape. That tension between liberation and reification is the essential lesson here. A map is not the territory, and yet it shapes the traveler's choices. So how do we draw maps of doubt that help rather than harm? Here is the cartographer's distilled method translated into a toolkit you can use immediately. Step 1. Name the decision and set a gentle time boundary. Start by writing down the decision you face in one sentence. Keep the sentence neutral. Decide whether to accept the job offer in City X rather than, should I ruin my life by moving? Then set a gentle time boundary for the mapping exercise, 30 to 60 minutes. This keeps your mind from turning the map into an endless excavation of fear. Step 2. List your doubts out loud or on paper. Pretend you're dictating to the cartographer. Say everything you are afraid of, starting with the loudest voice. Don't edit. Each doubt becomes a feature. Step 3. Translate doubts into topography. Use simple symbols, lines for paths people avoid, arrows for pressures that push you, bogs for ruminative thoughts that trap you, cliffs for fears of irreversible loss, bridges for possible supports or mitigations. Give each feature a short label and a single sentence clarifying what it means for you. For example, bridge, network in the city that could help find housing, or bog, fear of losing identity if I change careers. Step 4. Add elevation for stakes and likelihood. On the side, create a tiny axis, vertical for how important an outcome is to you, stakes, horizontal for how likely it is based on current information, probability. Place small marks next to each map feature indicating its stakes and probability. This helps you separate loudness from relevance. Some fears shout but are low probability. Some quiet concerns are high stakes and deserve attention. Step 5. Mark mutable versus fixed features. Use a colored pen or a simple symbol to mark what you can change. A bog labeled fear of failing an interview is mutable. You can practice. A cliff labeled loss of required caregiving time might be less mutable. This prevents the map from becoming deterministic. Step 6. Sketch escape routes and experiments. For every high-stakes bog or cliff, sketch at least one small bridge or detour. Short experiments you can run to test whether that bog is truly impassable. Make experiments micro: a weekend trial, a 3-month leave, a conversation with one person. These are the bridges you can build. Step 7. Invite a second mapper. Maps clarify when shared. A trusted friend, mentor, or a coach can point out features you overlooked. They can help you estimate probabilities or propose bridges. Importantly, invite someone who will challenge the map's permanence. Someone who reminds you this is a snapshot, not a law. Step 8. Commit to a revision ritual. Set a time to revisit the map after you run an experiment. Cross out features that proved false. Adjust probabilities. The point is to make the map dynamic. The cartographer learned that maps are most useful when treated as living documents. Now, why does this approach work psychologically? The act of externalizing doubt lowers cognitive load. Your brain is a limited workspace. When you force it to carry a dozen hypothetical disasters, it cannot also carry out practical problem solving. Mapping turns the noise into objects you can move, test, and label. It makes probabilities visible so you can see which fears are likely and which are loud but improbable. It also creates a ritualized distance between your immediate feelings and your actions. Instead of acting out of a sudden surge of anxiety, you consult the map, look for bridges, and choose an experiment. There is a communal advantage too. When people in a neighborhood mapped their doubts about starting a community garden, they found overlapping concerns and shared resources. Soil tests one person had already done became a bridge for others. A shared compost pile reduced the fears about upkeep. The map becomes a collective intelligence artifact. But the cartographer's deeper question, does an external map free choice or harden doubt, matters. Maps can do both. When treated as a flexible inquiry tool, a map reduces paralysis by making options visible and manageable. When treated as an absolute portrait, a map can reify inner patterns and produce self-fulfilling prophecies. To prevent maps from becoming prisons, use 3 guardrails. Guardrail 1. Label uncertainty and avoid certainty language. Always write probability estimate and my current belief next to major features. Avoid writing this will happen and prefer I think this might happen with probability X. Guardrail 2. Enforce short-term experiments. If a map suggests a barrier, require at least one small test before accepting it as true. Guardrail 3. Maintain a revision log. Record when and why you changed the map. This keeps the map tied to data, not to permanent identity. Now let's practice with a short guided exercise you can do now. Choose a decision you are currently stuck on. Take a blank sheet of paper or open a fresh note. Step A. Title the sheet with the decision sentence. Step B. Spend 5 minutes listing every doubt. Don't stop. Step C. Draw the simplest symbols. Lines for feared paths, a jagged line for a cliff, a blob for bogs. Label each. Step D. For the top 3 items by perceived importance, write one small experiment you can run in the next 2 weeks. If none comes to mind, ask, what would make this worry less powerful if I could test it? Then design a tiny test. Step E. Share the map with one trusted person and ask them to pose one skeptical question and one helpful bridge. Step F. Put the map somewhere visible for a week and set a reminder to check it after any small experiment. If you do this, you will immediately feel 2 changes. First, the decision will feel like an object you can move. Second, you'll notice which doubts were shouting and which were quietly large. Those quiet but large doubts deserve more careful bridges. There are also philosophical nuances worth holding gently. Drawing a map of doubt does not erase moral responsibility, nor does it absolve you of choosing. It makes visible the reasons you hesitate. Some hesitations reveal value conflicts. Others are vestiges of old narratives you inherited. The map helps you distinguish them. When someone asked the cartographer whether seeing a map of his daughter's fears made the girl less free, he shrugged and said, "A map can tell you where the mud is. It cannot make the mud feel any less cold. But if you know where the mud is, you can decide whether to build boots, a bridge, or a different path." In other words, maps do not remove choice, they structure it. They convert amorphous anxiety into tractable problems. What can I test? What can I defer? What requires a moral decision beyond calculable risk? That conversion is liberating because it restores the kind of agency that solves problems rather than rails against them. Yet there is a cultural risk. If we collectivize maps of doubt without the guardrails, the maps become prescriptive. A community map might label a neighborhood as risky and then withdraw investment, turning a social hesitancy into structural scarcity. That is why the cartographer always paired mapping with a commitment to revision and with an ethic of solidarity. Use the map to reveal opportunities for building bridges that benefit others, not to fossilize fear into policy. Finally, some practical rules for drawing ethical maps when you're working with groups. Rule 1. Include positive features. For every bog, draw a spring or a path that has supported someone before. Rule 2. Record sources. Note who contributed which observation so we can trace biases. Rule 3. Collect small tests. Make mapping a lab of experiments. Low cost, reversible, informative. Rule 4. Make the map public and mutable. A map becomes wisdom when others can edit and annotate, not when it's sealed in one person's handwriting. As you begin your first map of doubts, remember that the most useful maps are those that make room for surprise. They are provisional sketches, not fate charts. Use them to spot where you can act, not to justify inaction. If you are afraid that inventing a map will only make your fear firmer, steal the cartographer's most important ritual, the revision ceremony. Every month, open your map, read it aloud, ask what has changed, and cross out anything disproven. That repeated act teaches your brain that nothing on the map is eternal. It also teaches humility. You were wrong before, you might be wrong again. That's liberating. The final psychological insight is simple. Uncertainty is not just a problem, it's information. Doubts tell you where your values and your evidence are misaligned. When you draw that misalignment, you can choose experiments that align evidence with values, or you can accept the trade-off consciously. The map doesn't remove the cost, it clarifies it. The old cartographer never promised to erase anxiety. He promised to make it legible. Sometimes people used that legibility to free themselves. Sometimes they used it to confirm their fears. The difference was not the paper but the practice. Those who treated the sheets as living tools moved. Those who turned them into prophecies did not. So tonight, if you feel the mud under your feet, take a sheet, sketch the bogs and bridges, and commit to one small experiment. Try the map as a hypothesis, not a sentence. If the map points to a cliff, ask, what small step could I take to test whether the cliff is real? If the map reveals a bog where your thoughts get trapped, mark a bridge built from curiosity rather than judgment. And if you find value in this method, like mapping has helped the people who came to the old cartographer, share it. Tell someone how you drew the map and what bridge you plan to test. If this idea unlocked something for you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a map of their own, and subscribe to Mind Unlocked for more tools that turn complex internal states into simple, actionable practices. Because the work of better thinking is not about erasing uncertainty, it's about learning how to travel through it together.